In January 2010, Sandra Bullock adopted a 3-month-old baby from New Orleans and named him Louis. Now he's a teenager and even gives Sandra his Oscar-winning mom career advice. But here's the twist. Louis looks just like someone from Sandra's past, someone she hasn't talked about in years. The resemblance is shocking. Same jawline, same eyes, same way of moving. Even Sandra's closest friends were surprised and asked her questions. The real story feels like a movie. Sandra was born on July 26, 1964 in Arlington, Virginia. Her mom, Helga Meyer, was a German opera singer, and her dad, John Bullock, was a voice coach who also worked for the U.S. military. Even though Sandra was born in the U.S., she didn't grow up there. When she was little, her family moved to Nuremberg, Germany. She spent most of her childhood there, learning German, being around music and taking in European culture. Because of her mom's opera career, the family moved often. Sandra grew up backstage in big theaters, surrounded by musicians and performers. By the time she was 5, she wasn't just watching operas, she was performing in them. She sang in kids' choirs for big productions like The Magic Flute and Carmen. These weren't school plays, they were professional shows with serious rehearsals and schedules. Sandra learned to sing in German and got used to the discipline that came with performing. While most kids were playing outside, Sandra was on the road, in orchestra pits and under stage lights. But life wasn't always exciting. When the family moved back to the US and settled in Washington, D.C., Sandra struggled. She didn't fit in. Her classmates teased her for wearing old-fashioned German clothes. She felt different. This early experience of being the outsider stayed with her and taught her to be more understanding of others. German remained her first language, and she still speaks it today. She also has both German and American citizenship. That mix of cultures helped shape her unique style and personality. In Hollywood, where many stars seem similar, Sandra stood out because she felt real. Her childhood was full of change, new cities, schools, and people. By age 10, she had lived in several places in Germany and Austria. This taught her how to adjust, connect with others quickly, and stay strong during tough times. After high school, Sandra went to East Carolina University to study theater. She almost graduated, but in 1986, with just 3 credits left, she dropped out. She thought school was boring and wanted to chase her dream. So she moved to New York City. New York wasn't easy. She had little money and worked night jobs as a bartender, waitress, and coat checker. She'd work late into the night and still attend acting classes early in the morning. Her apartment had no heat, and she lived off cheap food like ramen noodles. But she didn't give up. That struggle made her humble and strong, traits that later made her a powerful actress. In 1987, she got her first movie role in a low-budget thriller called Hangmen. No one noticed it. She acted in other small films too, like Religion Inc. and Who Shot Patacongo. None of them were successful. Most people haven't even heard of them today. But Sandra didn't mind. She said they taught her valuable lessons and reminded her of her roots. Things began to change in 1988 when she performed in a small off-Broadway play called No Time Flat. It wasn't a big production, but a talent agent saw her and was impressed. He signed her, and soon she got a part in a 1989 TV movie called Bionic Showdown. She played a young scientist. It wasn't a lead role, but it got her noticed. In 1990, she landed a lead role in an NBC sitcom called Working Girl, based on the hit movie. She played Tess McGill. The show didn't last, critics didn't like it, and it was canceled after 12 episodes. But it gave her more exposure and taught her that failing doesn't mean it's over. In 1994, Sandra got the role of Annie in the movie Speed. She wasn't the first choice. The role was originally written for a tough African-American paramedic, and Halle Berry was the top pick. She turned it down. Other big names like Meryl Streep and Kim Basinger were also considered. Sandra wasn't even on the list. But she showed up to the audition, used a paper plate as a steering wheel, and impressed everyone. Her chemistry with Keanu Reeves, who also wasn't the studio's first choice, was electric. That connection made the movie work. When Speed hit theaters on June 10, 1994, it became a huge hit. It made over $350 million worldwide on a budget of just $37 million. Overnight, Sandra became a global star. In 1995, she starred in While You Were Sleeping, which made $182 million. She was now known as a rom-com queen and action star. She could do it all, and studios loved her for it. That same year, she started her own production company, Fortis Films, with her college friend Mark Brunetz. Her sister Gessiny ran the company for 5 years. Sandra wasn't just acting anymore, she was producing and shaping her own projects. In 1997, she made a big deal with Warner Brothers to produce more films. Fortis Films produced hits like Hope Floats, Miss Congeniality, and 2 Weeks' Notice. She also moved into TV, producing the popular sitcom George Lopez from 2002 to 2007. Few actresses at the time had that kind of power. But not every project worked. In 1997, she agreed to do Speed 2 Cruise Control. Keanu Reeves didn't return, and Sandra had doubts. But the studio offered her $11 million, much more than the $500,000 she made from the first film. She made a deal, she'd do the sequel only if they also funded her personal project Hope Floats. The sequel flopped, critics hated it. It barely made a profit and won awards for being one of the worst sequels ever. Sandra later called it embarrassing and joked that only 5 people liked it. In 2003, Sandra surprised her godson by arranging a visit to the set of his favorite show Monster Garage. The host Jesse James built custom motorcycles. Sandra and Jesse met there, and something clicked. Even though they seemed like total opposites, she was America's sweetheart, and he was a tattooed biker. They started dating. Eventually they got married. What started as a sweet surprise turned into one of the most talked about love stories in Hollywood. Sandra Bullock and Jesse James got married on July 16, 2005, in Santa Barbara. She was 41. Jesse already had 3 kids, including a daughter named Sunny. Sunny's mother was Janine Lindemulder, a former adult film star and a convicted felon. After a long custody battle and Janine's time in prison for tax issues, Sandra and Jesse were given custody of Sunny in December 2009. Sandra didn't just accept Jesse's kids, she loved them. She once said, "I married into children. I love those children. My love for them is no different than if I had given birth to them." That showed everyone she was serious about family. But things fell apart quickly. Just days after Sandra won her first Oscar for The Blind Side in March 2010, news broke that Jesse had cheated. At least 5 women claimed to have had affairs with him: tattoo models, strippers, even someone from his shop. One woman, Michelle Bombshell McGee, sold her story to the press, including messages and details. Jesse admitted he had cheated, but it was too late. Sandra had just won an Oscar on March 7th. By March 17th, the scandal was everywhere. Instead of enjoying her success, she was heartbroken. Paparazzi surrounded her home, and her personal life became front-page news. To make it even harder, Sandra was in the middle of adopting a baby boy. She had secretly brought home Louis in January 2010, when he was just over 3 months old. Now she was adopting him alone. On April 23, 2010, she filed for divorce, which was finalized on June 28, 2012. She stayed quiet, focusing on her new son. She once said, "How do you deal with grief without hurting your child?" She made sure Louis felt loved and protected. No one knew about the adoption at first. Even at the Oscars, Sandra carried Louis's tiny green socks in her purse as a secret connection to him. Louis was born in New Orleans, a city Sandra cared deeply about since Hurricane Katrina. She once said, "Something told me my child was there." Once she met Louis, it all made sense. Sandra didn't just become a mom, she became part of the New Orleans community. She donated to schools, gave surprise speeches, and stayed involved quietly. She named her son Louis after jazz legend Louis Armstrong. His middle name, Bardo, was meaningful too. It came from a German saint, a Buddhist belief about life and death, and honored her mother, whose middle name was Louise. In 2015, Sandra adopted again, this time a 2.5-year-old girl named Layla from Louisiana. Layla had been in foster care and was dealing with trauma. Paparazzi tried to expose the adoption early and even followed them to the emergency room. But Sandra fought to protect her daughter. She even took classes to learn how to care for kids who've been through trauma. Louis helped Layla adjust and feel safe. Sandra said Louis led the way. On June 8, 2014, Sandra came home to her Bel Air mansion late at night. Her son Louis wasn't home, the nanny had taken him to her apartment. That decision may have saved his life. Around 1 a.m., Sandra heard noises. At first she thought it was coming from her gym, but then she realized someone was in the house. She locked her bedroom door and hid in the closet, calling 911 and whispering for help. She had watched crime shows like Dateline, but now she was living it. She feared the worst. The intruder was Joshua James Corbett. He had been stalking her and watching her house. That night, he jumped her fence, rang her doorbell for 15 minutes, then entered through a side door. In his bag were magazine cutouts of Sandra's face, a note saying she was his wife, and a gun permit. He owned 8 guns, though he didn't bring one that night. Police arrested Corbett. Sandra later said the event changed her. She developed severe PTSD. Sometimes, even a quick glance out a car window could make her cry. She worried about how this would affect Louis. Would he sense her fear? She didn't want him to carry her trauma. Sandra started therapy, including EMDR, a special treatment for trauma. It helped her heal. Meanwhile, Corbett went to court. In 2017, he pleaded no contest to stalking and burglary. He got 5 years probation, a restraining order, and had to get mental health treatment. But by 2018, he stopped going to court. On May 2, police went to arrest him. Corbett locked himself inside his home. After a 5-hour standoff with SWAT, police entered and found him dead. He had taken his own life. Sandra wasn't looking for love when she met Brian Randall in January 2015. She hired him to take photos at Louis' birthday party. Brian, a former model turned photographer, showed up with his camera, and something clicked. Soon they were seen together at Jennifer Aniston's wedding in August 2015. By 2016, Brian had moved in with Sandra and her kids. He became a loving father figure to Louis and Layla, while also staying close to his own daughter from a previous relationship. Sandra, who had once been heartbroken by Jesse James, found peace with Brian. In a 2021 interview, she said Brian was the kind of person she wanted her children to learn from. He was patient, kind, and always led by example. Their home was full of love and calm. But in 2020, Brian was diagnosed with ALS, a disease that slowly takes away muscle control. It becomes hard to move, speak, or breathe. Most people with ALS only live 2 to 3 years. Brian survived for 3. Sandra and Brian kept it private. They didn't want their kids to grow up watching someone suffer. They turned their home into a care center with nurses and kept things as normal as possible. Sandra stopped acting to focus on family. Her sister said Sandra gave everything to care for Brian. During the pandemic, they locked down more than anyone else. Only a few people were allowed in. Sandra knew ALS would take everything, but she made sure it wouldn't take away their peace. On August 5, 2023, Brian Randall passed away at age 57. Sandra was by his side. Sandra Bullock's kids were grieving too. When her partner Brian Randall passed away, the family released a short, quiet statement. They thanked the doctors and nurses who cared for him, asked for privacy, and mourned in silence. Meanwhile, something else was unfolding. Michael Oher, the man whose life inspired The Blind Side, dropped a shocking legal case in August 2023. The world had seen the 2009 movie as a touching story about a wealthy white family adopting a poor black teen with football talent. Sandra Bullock even won an Oscar for playing Leigh Anne Tuohy. But Oher claimed it was all a lie. He said the Tuohys never actually adopted him. When he turned 18 in 2004, they had him sign papers he thought made him part of their family. In reality, they put him under a conservatorship, a legal setup usually used for people who can't make decisions on their own, like those with disabilities. Oher had no such issues. He was a strong, capable young man starting college football. Judge Kathleen Gomes, who had served for 43 years, later said she had never seen a conservatorship used in this way. Oher didn't find out the truth until February 2023. That's when he realized the Tuohys had control over his story and decisions. He filed a lawsuit to end the conservatorship, demand financial records, and ask for any money he was owed. The lawsuit opened up a bigger issue: the money behind The Blind Side. The movie made over $309 million worldwide. Oher said he received little to none of that. He claimed the Tuohys and their 2 biological children each got $225,000 plus 2.5% of the film's profits. He said he didn't even know there was a contract, much less sign one. That contract came through Sean Tuohy's friend Michael Lewis, who wrote the book the film was based on. The Tuohys denied it all. They said everyone, including Oher, got equal payments. According to them, each person received around $14,000 from the book and up to $138,000 from the movie. But Oher's lawyers said there were no financial records filed, even though the law required it. They believed the Tuohys used the conservatorship to profit off his life while keeping him out of the earnings. As the case gained attention, people started to look at the movie differently. Critics pointed out that it followed a common white savior story, where a rich white family helps a poor black kid and is praised for it while the kid is shown as helpless. After the lawsuit, many questioned how true the movie really was. Some even demanded Sandra Bullock return her Oscar. While she wasn't directly blamed, people said her performance helped promote a story that may not have been accurate. Sandra was devastated. She had believed in the film and its message. Now, one of her proudest roles was tied to controversy and disappointment, and the timing made it even harder. Just 9 days before the lawsuit, Brian Randall had died from ALS. Sandra had spent years caring for him, keeping his illness private. She hadn't made any public appearances since his death. Her close friends like Jennifer Aniston, Keanu Reeves, Sylvester Stallone, and Ryan Reynolds stood by her. But Sandra was overwhelmed. She was dealing with the grief of losing her partner and the heartbreak of seeing one of her biggest achievements fall apart. One pain was personal. The other hit her career. People close to her said she was holding it together, but inside she was deeply hurt. Sandra adopted Louis in January 2010. He was just 3 months old. Now he's a teenager taller than his 5'7" mom, calm, confident, and thoughtful. Though he's rarely seen in public, those who have spotted him say he looks a lot like Sandra, not by blood but by spirit. She said many times that it feels like he was always meant to be hers. She calls him perfect. He's also mature. Sandra once said Louis gives her advice about her career. Friends say he has a quiet strength that draws people in, but Sandra never wanted her kids in the spotlight. When she adopted Louis and later her daughter Layla in 2015, she promised to protect their privacy. She even had Brian Randall sign a non-disclosure agreement before he spent real time with them. Sandra's journey to motherhood was hard. She started the adoption process while still married to Jesse James. After their divorce, she continued on her own. Then came more pain. In 2014, a stalker broke into her home while she was inside. She was traumatized and later diagnosed with PTSD. Therapy helped, but the fear never fully left. Then in 2023, she lost Brian to ALS. But through it all, Sandra stayed focused on her kids. She calls her family nutty, loving, and understanding. No matter what happened, she gave them a safe, loving home. Meanwhile, her career continued to shine. From her first role in 1987's Hangman, to her big break in 1994's Speed, to starring in more than 50 films, she did it all. She won an Oscar for The Blind Side, was nominated again for Gravity, and picked up a Golden Globe and SAG Award. In 2005, she got her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Fans call her America's sweetheart not just for her movies but for her warmth and honesty. Whether it's Miss Congeniality or The Lost City, Sandra keeps audiences coming back. After more than 35 years in the spotlight, she remains one of Hollywood's most loved stars. Her story is one of strength, survival, and deep love for her family.